Hi guys, happy Wednesday and welcome back to Time Out with Maria. This week I'll be going a little bit deeper into the Middle East and what is going on there. I do have a special guest this week, um, whose name is Omar, and I'm really excited to talk with him. He is one of the leaders of the Unifying Politics Club in our school district, but we will dive into that a little bit deeper. First, I want to invite him on the podcast and see how he's doing. So, hi Omar.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing great.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. So I just want to ask you a little bit about yourself. Could you give me some background about where you're from?
Sure. So I was born here in the United States. I'm originally Egyptian. I've been in the same house my entire life, same school district. My family immigrated from the Middle East. My mom and dad met in Egypt. My sister was born in Egypt. My brother was born in Saudi Arabia. Um, I've definitely had a very average, life of anybody in Downingtown. I'm very interested in politics. I like to cook. Um, I love to do just basic everyday kid stuff.
Awesome. So obviously we're both like really interested in politics and we're both politically active. So how did you get into politics and what kind of motivated you?
So when I was about 5 years old, it was in 2011. Um, I remember I was sitting next to the TV with my mom, and I just remember her bawling her eyes out. And so eventually I figured out that in my home country of Egypt, a revolution was happening. And that kind of started a chain reaction for just my love of politics. Seeing, 100 million people in Egypt standing up to 30 years of oppression just mind blowing me as a kid. And so just made me read more into politics, foreign and domestic here in the US, around the world. And it kind of kicked off like a love of politics that I don't know if I have another love for politics like I do any other subject.
Um, well, I mean, I'm really happy to hear that because I am also obviously really passionate about politics, but I think that I it's like you're very unique because you have this almost like a tether or a personal connection to what's going on in the Middle East and especially Egypt because that's where your family's from. So I think that it's just a really unique perspective, and I want to go into that a little bit later. But I did want to talk a bit about before we get into the Middle East because we will dive deep into the Middle East. But I wanted to get into like unifying politics. What is the story? I've been to a few meetings. I love it. It's a really great discussion, but can you just tell me like about that?
Absolutely. So Unifying Politics Club or UPC, it's based here in DASD. So me and about five others started it. The first
Mhm.
guy who kind of came up with the idea was my friend a few years ago. I hadn't heard from him in a little bit. He came kind of out of the blue.
Okay.
We started talking a little bit, talking about wanting to start a club, and we got the ball moving really, really quick. We got four other people on board, two from each school, and then from there, um, we recruited. We did a lot of work behind the scenes. The club started in February, but we were working since maybe November on just trying to shape it up, and
Okay.
now it's where it is.
Yeah, and you guys have a pretty big like social media presence, especially in the school district. I know that you guys aren't school district affiliated, similar to the Young Voters, which is a group that I'm a part of, and I also am a member of Unifying Politics as well. But what is like going on? Why won't the school endorse your club? I know that why they won't kind of get involved in the Young Voters and allow us to, be present at school, but why can't Unifying Politics be present at school? Like, what is going on? Did you guys reach out? Like, what's the story?
So at first we were affiliated with DASD.
Hmm.
I believe from like February to maybe mid-April, and then we went on a hiatus around spring break. And there was just a lot going on. I think this year, for just the administration at school,
Yeah.
it's not like any other year they've ever faced, with COVID, having to make big decisions. And so at the end of the day, having a club, which is a political club, obviously, you know, adults tend to feel like they need to have an extra eye just to make sure there's, peace and calm in that
Hmm.
club. I feel as if, maybe we weren't the district wasn't ready for us this year. However, definitely looking forward. We've been in communication with them constantly. Looking forward to getting back with them next year.
Yeah, and I'm really happy about that because although the Young Voters isn't affiliated with school, I'm not sure if like our founder Nico Kraus, I don't know if he kind of contacted the school and tried to do something about that. I'm not 100% sure because we are an independent group as well, and it's just really interesting to see these independent groups like such as yours. And I know that you all started being, one with the district, but you're now like kind of off on your own. And I know that you want to do a little bit of a rebranding, but it's cool to see these students who are just like working really hard and towards something they're super passionate about and growing and sharing their insights and just loving it. So I really like this. It's all so positive and it makes me happy because people our age need to be educated on what's going on politically, economically, all over the world, just not in the United States. And I think that something that's a huge issue and is important to kind of take in when we look about teenagers our age who are politically active versus those who aren't politically active is what is their perspective? And I think that those who aren't politically active may just have a perspective on the United States and don't really see countries outside the United States um, compared to those who are politically active. So I think that the young voters and unifying politics, not exactly working together, but, having you on my podcast today and maybe doing some videos together in the future is just like a really awesome step in the right direction. And it kind of shows other people our age that you can be independent and you can branch out. And even though that everyone says, oh, don't talk about politics in school and it's a sore topic, understandable. But I think that within friend groups and in certain social situations where it is comfortable, that it's something that we should be educated on. And I just wanted to segue that into the Middle East, which is so controversial right now. And I know that you have a ton of information to tell me about that. So, did you just want to like dive in?
I mean, definitely right now with the Middle East, what's getting the most media attention, rightfully so, is the Palestine
Hmm.
Israel conflict. I personally believe what's going on in Israel and Palestine is, obviously the Middle East has gone through stability and instability over the past few decades. I think that small area of land is fueling instability. I think in that region, and I think in the greater world, I think that little piece of Jerusalem and
Hmm.
uh, just Palestine and Israel as one. I think it's fueling all of the kind of, or it has a piece in conflicts, big or small.
Yeah. And I know that previously when we spoke before the podcast, we kind of were just like bouncing ideas off each other about what we could discuss today. And I remember you telling me a little bit about oil and trading in the Suez Canal. So how does that play into the bigger picture of what is going on in the Middle East?
The Middle East is very important because it has a lot of things in that specific region. It has the Suez Canal, which is very important because we saw just a few weeks ago when the Suez Canal was blocked,
Yeah,
how much money was lost, how much value was lost. So the
super
Suez,
controversial.
yeah, very controversial, super important. It's been fought for before. Egypt now has it under its arm, but it is, back in the 60s and 50s, very important. Oil is another big one. It's the Middle East has a lot of it. It's, some nations are very rich because of it. Some nations are in war because of it. It's just, in the Gulf, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, they all have oil. They're very rich. And then when
Mhm.
you go up to Iraq, they're in civil war. So oil is another big one. And then there's a lot more resources that the Middle East has, and I think that just the lack of those resources in the West has kind of caused an issue between the West and the Middle East, and so that's kind of where we are now. There's a little Cold War going on in the Middle East because of Saudi Arabia and Iran,
Mhm.
who are fighting proxy wars. For example, in Yemen, the Houthi rebels are backed by Iran. The government is backed by Saudi Arabia, and so that's just one instance of Iran and Saudi Arabia trying to extend their, you know, influence on the Middle East. And so, just that Cold War mixed with the West wanting resources is why we are where we are now.
Yeah, so touching on kind of like Iraq and Saudi Arabia and all of that and the Cold War and wars that they're fighting, would you be able to go into a little bit more detail specifically about these conflicts? Because there are a lot of listeners who don't really know about these conflicts, and we hear about them, we hear how we're sending soldiers there, and we're spending billions a year to protect ourselves, but what is really going on is my question.
Absolutely. So this is this is where I deviate from a lot of thinkers, especially in the West and in America. The Middle East is a this that situation. What it looks like is that there's a bunch of civil wars going on. It goes back to 9/11. The United States invaded Iraq to bring democracy to Iraq and defeat Saddam Hussein. In my opinion, there is a much deeper story to this, and just being able to speak to my father, who grew up in these wars. He, in
Mhm.
'67, he dealt with the Israel War, and as a father, he couldn't even see his kids because of the Gulf War. Um, in the United States, we have the military-industrial complex, and that is really, really important. They play a very, very big role in what's going on in the Middle East because they have to sell weapons, and weapons, if we're not using weapons, then there's no need to buy weapons. So weapons have to be used in order to be bought. And so the Middle East is a good place to buy or for to sell weapons to because number one, the population density is very, very big. So when you strike a missile somewhere, it'll have a decent amount of impact. Number two, just the fact that the Middle East, for multiple reasons, kind of fell behind means that there's still kind of religious and cultural conflicts, and so uh, from what I can see, what's happening in Israel now and what's happened in Iraq. Iraq was supposed to be a few weeks war. It was supposed to be we're going to go in there, we're going to take out Saddam Hussein. We'll be in and out, but in reality, it's been more than 15 years now, and we're still there.
Yeah.
Uh, Afghanistan, our longest war, we just decided to leave. And even then,
Hmm.
people are questioning if we're actually going to leave. It's all because there's weapons that need to be sold. And when we sell these weapons, there's people here making profit. The dictators in the Middle East are making profit. So people are the high ranking people are making money, but it's at the cost of civilian lives, be that children or adults.
That whole like economic like chain of events with supply and demand seems like what's really driving the Middle East right now and kind of the United States inclusion and these issues.
Absolutely. The issue in Palestine, for instance, and Israel, is that Israel has one of the best militaries in the world. I believe it's the fourth largest military in the world. They have the Iron Dome, which is the missile defense system, and so every time Israel fires a rocket into the Gaza Strip, there is now a need to buy more weapons. So the United States will make money off of whenever Israel fires a rocket into Gaza because they can now sell more weapons. We saw that in Iraq. We saw that numerous occasions, and history tends to repeat itself. And I'm seeing it right now. The airstrikes and the weapons being used in Israel is it backs that up 100%.
Yeah. It's devastating. I mean, the lives that have been lost. Um, I can't imagine to, feel what these people feel, but all I can do is really empathize about what's going on. With the whole supply and demand chain of events, how stopped or interrupted so that violence isn't as prominent in the Middle East? And if the United States were to cut the Middle East off from weapons, do you think that they would find a different supplier to keep fighting these wars?
I don't think so. If I'm being honest with you, this is the Middle East. Just seeing what happened during the Arab Springs, what's happening during these war, what's happening in Palestine. It's a corruption issue. There is massive
100%.
amounts of corruption, and unfortunately, as a proud American, there is corruption in the Pentagon. There is corruption in our government, which is what's fueling these last decades and decades of death and violence. So I
Hmm.
personally, I don't see a way anytime soon where this will start to fade out. Uh, I mean, maybe the media coverage will go down, but there's still going to be people losing their lives because this is the best place to sell weapons to. This is the place where it's like in 2011 we tried getting rid of the dictators. We got rid of Hosni Mubarak. Now we're under military rule again. So it's the best place to sell weapons. It's there's the most resources there that we're getting. So I don't see this ending anytime soon.
That that makes me a little upset.
Yeah,
And
it
I
makes
think
everyone
that you
upset.
I I just had to like take it in and think for a second. I honestly I agree with you because the United States needs to pay off their debts. They need to make money, and if it's their life that they're not losing, they don't really care. And it's sad. Like it makes me stand back and go, "What the hell? That's messed up."
Uh-huh.
Because the United States is known as a place, that's supposed to be caring and home of the free and the brave and home of the free because of the brave. And it's like, wait, hold on, wait a minute. The United States is selling their weapons to the Middle East, letting lives be taken. It's not on their watch, but they are allowing it to happen by supplying weapons just because they need to get out of debt and pay off their own issues. So that corruption is totally prevalent and I see it.
Yeah, another example, by the way, is during the Iraq-Iran war, the United States was funding both sides. They
Mhm.
weren't they were literally giving weapons, selling weapons to both sides. I mean, that's like
Ugh.
you don't do that if you're not corrupt and just doing it for the money. And it's not like the government is making money out of this, like the government itself. It's more so there's people making money out of this. There's people who have investments made in Boeing and different
Yeah.
companies in the
It was individual wholesalers.
uh-huh. And so when these dudes get to the Pentagon and they start out with a net worth, that's not great. And they've been working for 15 years now. They're
Mhm.
rich. Like they've made money off of the death of innocent Middle Easterners, innocent people who have been screwed over by Western involvement in their business for, I mean, over a century now.
Yeah. And what I want to know is do these people like feel remorse? Because I could never morally do that. I think that human life is valued so above money. And it's sad that our economy has come to this, the world powers have come to this, that it's all about money, money, money. And that's what drives the economy. And I think that's one of the reasons why our economy is doing well right now. But it's just I don't like it. But
It's not just the U.S. by the way. I mean Russia also has something to do with this.
mhm,
Iran sends weapons to Syria. Russia sends weapons to Syria. The United States sends weapons to Saudi Arabia and Israel and Egypt. It's like there's two superpowers who are doing this,
okay.
and there's no remorse to be felt when money talks the way it does.
Yeah, I get that. So with your your dad and how he's from Egypt, how does this make your perspective unique on the Middle East?
I think that, I've dealt with a lot of my American friends who were brought up in the US who don't have relations to the Middle East. And they always tell me a story, and I just laugh of what they think is going on in the Middle East. Because just speaking to my dad, he's told me some really brutal stories. He lived during the 67 war
Hmm.
with Egypt and Israel. He's told me some brutal stories of elementary schools with no military bases nearby getting blown up by airstrikes. So my perspective is unique because I didn't have to read the history books to understand this stuff. I'm
Hmm.
literally talking to the people who wrote the history books, who made the history happen. So when you have that kind of connection, and I mean, all of my father's and mother's friends here in the United States left the Middle East, left Syria, left Palestine, left the Gulf because of they were the ones living in that history. And so my perspective is hearing directly from people who live these horrors. It gives me a different feel than if I was brought up in the United States by parents who maybe didn't have connections to the Middle East and hearing Western propaganda about what's happening in the Middle East.
Yeah. I think you touched on before when we talked previously about how you do like have some friends that still live in the Middle East. And do you think that there's a difference between what the media is covering and what they are telling you? Do you think there's any censorship of the press at play?
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know, just talking about American media, CNN and Fox are always told, it's always made as if they're two different media companies, and in a way they are. But at the end of the day, CNN fired one of their commentators a few years ago because he said from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. Uh, that's just one instance of the media playing a role in this. And that doesn't excuse the Arab media either. The state television in the Middle East also plays a good role in this. So the media is definitely not portraying the same story, and not just the media. I'd say what we learn in school is not portraying
Definitely.
what I have heard and seen with my own eyes in back home in the Middle East.
And from talking to you and comparing that to what I've been taught in school in my history books, I feel like it's a breath of fresh air, and I'm taking in all this new information that I never knew before. And not to say that I love it because I love politics and world economy, and this is just so fascinating to me. But I want more people to be able to have this perspective that you have, or even this perspective to be conveyed to them. Because if we don't know what's going on in the rest of the world, how are we supposed to make sound decisions here? How are we supposed to make sound decisions about who we elect and their policies? So everything plays in this big like circle of life. Everything comes together. Everything comes full circle. Like we're just almost running in a circle in a sense because something that's going on in the Middle East could affect our economy and vice versa. So it is just really intriguing
It
to kind
is. It
of,
definitely
yeah.
is interesting to talk about, but just, because I used to think exactly like, how my American friends thought about the Middle East. I always thought, it's just a bunch of wars and revolutions and this and that. When I first heard the information about, and I've barely touched the surface with you just because, it's very short. But when I heard some of like the true events that with regards to Israel and Hamas and who's really behind Hamas, I was at first in denial because I was just there's no way that somebody could morally be just do commit some of these atrocities. But I I definitely have some hope because I feel like more people are starting to wake up to the military industrial complex, to the weapon sales, to the corruption, but we're far away still.
Yeah. So something I did want to go over was Hamas. Am I saying that right? Hamas, Hamas,
Yeah, Hamas,
Hamas.
yeah.
Okay. I did a little bit of research, but I think that you would be so much more informative than me.
Uh-huh.
So can you just like tell everyone what this group is, like what is going on?
So on the surface, excuse me, the Gaza Strip, which is
Okay.
bordering Egypt and then Little Strip and then Israel.
Okay.
They are a militant group. They came up, I believe, they came up during the Second Intifada when they emerged in the 2000s. They do have weapons. They do have rockets. Nothing crazy. They're not like Hezbollah. Hezbollah is in Lebanon. They have chemical weapons. But
Okay.
Hamas is a militant group. They're seen on the surface as defending Palestine if you're Palestinian, or if you're looking from far away as a terrorist group.
Okay. And do they have any sort of political, like, are they politically active? Do they influence politics at all in the Middle East?
Yeah, I'd say in Palestine because there is no, I mean, Palestine isn't really like your average republic with a president and an elected Congress and or parliament. So they definitely play a role. However, recently just looking into Hamas, there's a lot of I'm definitely suspicious about who is really pushing them from behind because on the surface it looks like it's a political and militant group fighting Israelis. I think there's something suspicious with how they act and when they act.
Yeah, 100%. And that's why I asked you if they are politically involved. Because when I did a lot of research online about the Hamas group, and it seemed like they were driven politically. But do you have a theory of what is their motivation?
Um, I have a theory. Look, with the Middle East, every single day there's going to be a new theory because there's so much going on. However,
Yeah.
Hamas is definitely odd because of their relations with Israel. Uh, it's odd to me that every single time Prime Minister Netanyahu of Israel begins to fall from power, uh, Hamas will fire a rocket. And by the way, Israel has the Iron Dome defense system, which is one of the best missile defense in the world. Hamas has a few rockets. So it's odd to me that Hamas would deliberately fire rockets into Israel uh, while Netanyahu is falling from power like he was a few weeks ago to start a conflict with Israel and therefore keep Netanyahu in power. And this isn't the first time it's happened. It's happened before.
So
So
do you think that they are working together in some sort of form?
I won't say that I think that yet. I won't say that I can confirm that, but I
Hmm.
am suspicious that this is some sort of a controlled opposition
Okay.
ordeal. Because it doesn't add up unless somebody else is funding Hamas to do this right when Netanyahu's falling from power. But again, what is that somebody else getting?
Like I can't see how that would be helping them.
Exactly. Like if Iran decided, uh, I'm not sure if you're aware. 2 weeks ago, Israel was having, or a few weeks ago, Israel was having elections, and then
Yes.
Netanyahu, it was getting tough for him. The president was threatening to replace him. Why would Iran? Why would another country tickle or incentivize? And I'm not saying Israel is funding Hamas. So that's absolutely not what I'm saying. I'm saying that Hamas is being incentivized by somebody. Who that somebody is, remains to be seen, to fire
Hmm.
rockets deliberately at Israel while Netanyahu's falling from power. It's suspicious, but
Yeah.
again, I'm not going to confirm anything because it's a really tricky subject with Hamas, and they are not good guys. They are not defending Palestinian morals. They're actually making it worse. These peaceful protests were peaceful until Hamas stepped in. So it is suspicious, but again, I won't confirm anything.
Okay. And then one last thing about Hamas, I just wanted to ask. I did read about how they do not like Israelis and that they took their land, and there was kind of like a land struggle with like region struggle. Can you touch on that a little bit?
You want my
Yes, of course.
I believe that Israel is definitely uh, the I mean Hamas is a bad guy for sure.
Hmm.
The Arab dictators are a bad guy for sure. I hate all of them, but I'd say Israel is at fault here for what's going on. In 48, when the partition happened, you know, there was the Nakba Day, which is in Arabic translate to the catastrophe.
Okay.
600 villages were destroyed. Uh, Countless Palestinians were forced to be homeless. During the election of 2020 here in the United States, a village in the Jordan Valley in the occupied West Bank was destroyed. The IDF went in with excavators and took down all the houses and all of the structures. So there's signs that Israel is beginning to take out Palestinians deliberately because they're Palestinians and that they're not willing to negotiate. Even Netanyahu has declined ceasefires, and today he came out and said that he won't settle for a ceasefire. He's going to continue the attacks on Gaza. So Israel is has a significant and I'd say the most blame here.
Okay. Do you think there's any possible way that um that Jewish people and Muslims could live together again? I
Not
know it's a
under.
tricky
It
question.
is a tricky question. Look, I don't think if I went to the region right now and I pulled a Jewish person out, and I pulled a Palestinian person out, that they would kill each other on the spot. It's not like that. What's happening here, and it's history again is repeating itself, is that it's not necessarily the people that have a direct issue with the people. It's more so the government is fueling this hate. And so I don't see a way that Palestinians and Israelis can live together
Hmm.
because these governments just keep shaking the bottle with these people. They like if it wasn't for the Israeli government and the PLO and Hamas, there would be a lot more stability in that region because the people wouldn't directly hate each other. Prior to 1948 and prior to World War II and World War One, when it was Palestine, under Ottoman rule, uh, um, Jews, Muslims, Christians, they all coexisted together fine. It was only until fairly recently where this Jewish Arab, Muslim feud started. So I don't see a way where they're living together with the current state of our corruption. And even if the corruption stops today, and we start taking away pieces of this corruption, uh, it's still we're very far away from that because the people from both sides have been miseducated. In Egypt, I know the miseducation is so bad that some are told, they get out of school feeling like they must hate Israel, vice versa. So the miseducation is bad, and that'll take years to fix. The corruption is bad, that'll take a while to fix. So I don't see a way where a one state solution works.
And I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, I this there's such a misconception because I think that a lot of Americans may assume that, oh, the Israelis and the Palestinians just don't like each other. That's not it. It's these driving forces in the government and driving forces in terrorist groups that are making the conflicts. And if they
Exactly, yeah.
and I think that once people understand that the commoners just living there, trying to live out their life, live and breathe, make rent, buy food for their family, provide, they aren't the ones making the problems.
But also, what needs to be said is that yes, these people are not making the problems, but uh, when you start to see Israeli settlement groups who are backed by the Israeli government going
Mhm.
into the West Bank, going into different parts of former Palestine, and just destroying homes that were, centuries of. And by the way, this current conflict started because of that. It was in Sheikh Jarrah, which is in East Jerusalem. It's Palestinian land, should be Palestinian land, and countless families are being evicted because they're Palestinian. When that starts to happen, I can understand why the people are starting to get upset, but that's still no excuse to hate the other people. It's an excuse to hate the government, not to be anti-Semitic, not to be anti-Jewish, not to be anti the people. It's an excuse to be anti-government.
Thank you for saying that. I think that that's really important to remember, especially for our
Absolutely,
listeners. So
absolutely.
we are getting close to the end here, and I did have one last question I wanted to touch on. So for someone who's like a female 17-year-old Caucasian just like me, who's born in the United States, whose parents are not immigrants, who were also born in the United States, what are some ways that we can educate ourselves so that we can later form opinions that have like sound ideas behind them?
Talk directly to the source. It's not like all Palestinians have been wiped off the planet yet. There's a lot of Palestinians here. There's a lot of anti-Zionist Israelis here.
Mhm.
Talk to all the sources. Don't read too much into the history books because I'll tell you right now, I love to reading about political events is great. However, when it comes to something like this, there is a lot of propaganda being put out. So I'd say talk directly to the sources and, talk to known sources, like people like me who, you know, we're educated on the topic. We don't have significant biases. Talk to people like me. Talk to people who are from Palestine, from Israel, and make your own decision. I'm not going to tell you to say screw the Israeli government or screw the Palestinians. I won't do that. But what I will say is there is a very clear answer here, and if you talk to some of the sources, talk to some Palestinians, very as well.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your time today. I think that we've covered so much ground, and I hope all of our listeners have really taken something big away from today's episode. I know I have. I learned all new things. It was a pleasure having you. And I
Thank
hope
you so
maybe we
much.
can, of course, and I hope maybe we can do something again, maybe with unifying politics. We will figure it out in the future. But Omar and Maria, us together, talking politics is not going away. And I think that this is a new thing and there's more to come in the future.
Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. All right. Have a great night.
You as well.